Welcome to our tutorial about dimensional constraints. As in our previous tutorial, let's begin by creating some geometry. Right-click and enter to close the tool. Let's go to the Parametric tab, and let's apply some geometric constraints first. Since we've got 4 separate lines, let's begin by applying coincident constraints. This point and this endpoint. This point and this point here. Now the endpoints of these 2 lines. And last coincident constraint with these 2 endpoints. Okay, let's apply some vertical and horizontal constraints. Second here. Now we need 2 vertical constraints. And second one. Okay, we have a square. Let's apply a fixed constraint to one point of our square. Now we're ready to apply dimensional constraints. Dimensional constraints do work similarly to dimensions. From this drop-down menu, we can select linear, horizontal, or vertical. Let's start with a horizontal dimension. We'll select this point, and just drag out and release to place the dimension. Let's make it equal to 10 units. Click outside to register. Let's apply a vertical dimension now to finish dimensioning our square. Make it 10 units as well. And click outside to register. Okay, let's try another example now. Go to the Home tab, activate the Polyline command. Now right-click and switch to the Arc tool, and back to the line. And let's right-click and close our entity. Back to the Parametric tab. Let's apply a vertical relation to this line, and this line. Now horizontal constraints to this line, and this line. Okay, let's apply a tangent constraint between this line and the arc, and between this line and the arc. Now a fixed constraint to this point. Okay, let's select a linear dimension. Select this point and this point, make it 10 units. Let's apply a second linear dimension to this point and this point. Make it 5 units. If you're not sure which part of your geometry is constrained or not, just select and move a point. And then click Undo to restore your original geometry. Let's apply another linear dimension. This point and this point. Let's make it 2 units. Now, since this line and this line are equal, I can apply dimensional constraints, an equal constraint, or a vertical constraint. Let's right-click and select 2 points between this point and this point. Okay, we're almost done here. Lastly, we need to apply dimensions to this line, or the arc. I'm going to place a linear dimension here between these 2 points. Let's make it 5 units. And our geometry is now fully constrained. Let's apply one more dimensional constraint and see what happens. I'm going to apply a radial dimension to this arc. And we get a warning message from AutoCAD. Applying a dimensional constraint would over-constrain the geometry. Do we want to create a reference dimension or reselect the objects? Again, when you over-constrain something, there's too many dimensions. AutoCAD doesn't know which to use to calculate the model. I've opted to create a reference dimension. Here is the reference geometry. It's in brackets. And if I try to change it, I can't. Let's place one more reference dimension right here. Let's apply a linear dimension here. We get the same warning. Let's choose Create a Reference Dimension and watch what happens. I'm going to change Dimension 6 to 4 units. Notice that Dimension 7, which is a reference dimension, updates automatically. The reference dimension is determined by the surrounding geometry. I'd like to provide another example of why you might need a reference dimensional constraint. Let's create a right triangle. I'll do it using a polyline. Let's turn ortho mode on. 3 units in this direction, 4 units here. Enter. Now right-click and close. Here is our right triangle. Let's apply regular dimensions. Go to the Annotate tab, Linear Dimension. Select my first point and my second point. Place the dimension here. Another linear dimension. First point, second point, place it here. Let's apply an angular dimension between this line and this line. And let's go to the Parametric tab now. Here's a button that lets us convert regular dimensions to dimensional constraints. Pretty handy. Let me select my 3 dimensions. And when I'm done the selection, just right-click. In order for this example to work, I need to apply a vertical or horizontal constraint. And let's place an aligned dimensional constraint. First point, second point. AutoCAD warns us about the over-constraint problem. Let's choose Create a Reference Dimension again. Now, for example, if I want to change one of the cadets of my right triangle, I don't need to calculate how the hypotenuse changes. The length of the hypotenuse will update automatically. This concludes our lesson about using dimensional constraints.